1901, Haverhill, Massachusetts. A physician named Duncan McDougall set out to prove the impossible, that the human body has a soul. But how do you measure the unmeasurable? Well, with a scale, of course. Duncan determined that the soul was distinct from the body and must contain some form of mass. The experiment was simple. He would find people on their deathbed, place them on a large, specialized scale, and when they breathed their very last breath, he would monitor any divergence in mass. Duncan identified several patients whose deaths were imminent. He watched every single one of them die. The results were interesting, to say the least. Several of the patients led to inconclusive results. One patient lost some weight, but then put it back on shortly after dying. 2 patients lost some weight, 21 grams, but then lost even more weight. This is where Duncan's results become intriguing. In his tests, several more patients lost 21 grams. Excited about his findings, Duncan began publishing his works under the name The 21 Grams Experiment. His excitement soon turns to disappointment as the scientific community considered his experiments an outrage, and that his results had no merit. Physicists, doctors, and other scientists publicly ridiculed Duncan and his 21 grams experiment. Eventually, Duncan McDougall abandoned his experiments, and he faded into obscurity. It appeared that science would never be able to prove that the human body has a soul. But that may not exactly be true. On May 7, 1945, Germany surrenders in World War II. The great bloodshed would cease, and the worst of the Nazi leaders would be punished for their war crimes. But not all of them. Now that World War II was over, the Cold War was just beginning. The United States and the Soviet Union were just beginning a new war. Days after the end of World War II, in an act of desperation, the CIA, or Central Intelligence Agency of the United States, did something unthinkable. Something they would hide for decades. They secretly hired Nazis to spy on the Soviets. The United States would give them immunity for their war crimes, but there was one condition. These top-ranking Nazi officials would have to declassify all of their secret facilities, weapons, projects, and experiments. This is where our story really gets interesting. One of the most infamous and cruelest of the Nazi scientists, Emil Augsburg, exposed hundreds of classified projects that he had been working on. Most of it was research and experiments into thought and psychology, experimental medical procedures, and general intelligence operations. But one of the projects was different than the rest. The declassified file was written in Russian. In English, this was titled Case File Number 21. And it told a horrifying story. A few years earlier, in 1941, Germany invaded the Soviet Union. A large-scale battle ensued. The Germans overcame and occupied the city of Smolensk. Emil Augsburg, then a member of the infamous Nazi SS, was stationed in the city to lead intelligence efforts. After the city fell under German control, Augsburg's job was to root out and destroy all Soviet intelligence facilities. One by one, he located and burned out hidden Soviet bunkers throughout the city, executing all military officers and scientists that he found. Augsburg successfully reported to Berlin that he had located and destroyed 35 underground Soviet facilities. But the report wasn't completely true. There hadn't been 35 bunkers. There had actually been 36. The ancient fortification known as the Smolensk Kremlin surrounds the great city of the same name. Augsburg and his men had cleared out each of the watchtowers that had spread across the defense walls. Each of the towers had been emptied except for one last one. Resting at the wall's furthest edge was a massive tower that locals had named Veseluka, because it had once given amazing views of all their land. But the view that was witnessed there that night had been anything but amazing. As Augsburg and his men entered the building, they discovered rows and rows of bodies draped in sheets, all lying on hospital beds. Every bed was occupied, except for one. At first, he thought this might have been some sort of makeshift medical facility. But after closer inspection, he realized that couldn't be further from the truth. There were no medical staff, no doctors, or scientists anywhere to be found. And in the middle of the room, amid all the bodies, was a large metal cylindrical object that contained thousands of gallons of water. Augsburg, a native Russian speaker, quickly discovered the piles of research and data mixed in with various human subjects' names. He learned that the scientists had been measuring energy, and more specifically, subatomic particles. Measuring energy wasn't exactly anything new to Augsburg. It was part of his work. But what was curious to him was that they had measured the energy during a certain event. At the moment the patient died. This is when he made the most shocking discovery. The Soviets didn't only measure that energy, they were trying to capture it. Upon further reading, he learned that the Soviet prisoners had been transported from the Gulag prison camps and sedated heavily, near death. The experiments had begun 5 years prior, using the research from American physician Duncan McDougall. As he had failed, so had they. So they took things deeper, into the subatomic level, measuring atoms, protons, neutrons, and electrons. But still, the experiments were all a failure. They were unable to consistently measure any change in mass at the time of death. As Augsburg read on, the scientists started to ask themselves different questions. What if the soul didn't have any mass? What if they were measuring the wrong thing? Protons and electrons all maintain some form of mass. Was there another particle that couldn't be measured? One which contained zero mass? There was. These missing scientists had developed a machine that could measure the smallest particles known to man, the neutrino. They had received instant results. Purified water within the dark cylinder would capture small bursts of light when neutrinos would collide with water molecules. In each recorded instance, when somebody died, these collisions would spike in record numbers. Some form of energy was clearly leaving these people in high quantity as they took their final breath. To Augsburg, these findings were revolutionary, but the data didn't end in measurement and death. The Soviets had worked to take things one further step, not only to measure the energy leaving the body when it died, but to redirect it somewhere else. Augsburg was incredibly eager to learn more of what they had accomplished. It had become clear to him that the data he was looking for had been removed. All of the further notes and experimentation had either been burned or taken as these scientists fled the tower. There had only been 2 clues left behind that gave any insight into the mad scientist's final success. The first had been an empty hospital bed yielding a plastic label reading, number 21. The second had been a cryptic note left behind and signed under the name Belsky. Those final cryptic words read, "I've made a discovery so wonderful that I cannot bear to destroy it. A discovery so awful, I will ensure no one ever finds it." Unfortunately, the fighting in Smolensk became so awful that Augsburg was injured and sent back to Berlin, never to be able to finish his research into the project. It was archived away by the Germans and subsequently seized and declassified by the United States government. Over the years, both the 21 grams experiment and case number 21 disappeared into rumors and lore. The modern scientific community scoffs at even the thought of the existence of a human soul, and further tests on the subject are beneath any competent professional and the cause of science. But there's no doubt what Augsburg had discovered so long ago. And even today, near the walls of the Smolensk Kremlin and in the tower of the Valenska, it is said that the spirits of those departed remain trapped, and that if you listen carefully, in the quietest of nights, you can hear their whispers. Thanks for watching Mixed Reality, where I tell fictional stories about true events. My name is Dave. If you want to see more content like this, hit subscribe, and thanks again for watching.